London Commuter, one of, if not TSW's most anticipated routes, has been out for over a month now, and after a lot of time with it, I think I'm finally able to make my review. This is a route that was asked for by a whole lot of people, including myself, and when it was finally announced that it will be released as a part of the TSW Rush Hour bundle, the fan base erupted in joy. In this video, I'm going to be covering the topic of, did London Commuter live up to its expectations? Before we get into all of that though, I'm going to ask that all of you hit the like and subscribe buttons if you haven't already, and if you'd like to support me even further, consider becoming a channel member with the link in the description below. And with all of that said, let's hop into this in-depth review. The Rush Hour DLC bundle was finally announced on May 4th of this year. Yeah, Star Wars Day. Anyways, a lot of speculation was going on beforehand over what routes would be announced as a part of the bundle, and some people, including myself, suspected that one of the routes would be a subway route, being that it would give a real rush hour feel, especially if it was set in a city like London again, or others like New York, Tokyo, or elsewhere. We were all surprised when the routes were leaked and thought the information was too good to be true. Like really, an all new take on the Northeastern Corridor, bringing Amtrak back, a new German route, this time set in Eastern Germany, and one of the most requested routes from the UK with the Brighton Mainline. But it turned out that the leak was real, and with that, everyone's expectations skyrocketed. We all knew that even though the other two routes would have a lot of service variety and a lot for players to do, that the London Commuter, then called the Brighton Mainline route, would be the flagship route, and the one that needed to have the most work put into it. DTG needed to be able to capture the busy timetable, the hustle and bustle of Londoners at stations such as London Victoria, Clapham Junction, and East Croydon, and also represent London and the south coast of England properly. And then, all of a sudden, it was announced that the three routes would not all be released together, and while at first it seemed like that was because there was some serious issues with them, people quickly calmed down, realizing that a staggered release will give them ample time to enjoy each route before moving on to the next one. And then, Boston Sprinter was released. While a good American route, it didn't give a proper rush hour feel, as the bundle title would have you believe. This was because the only place that you could really experience rush hour was at the main station, Boston South. Everywhere else, service was basically non-existent. In addition to the lack of services, the route was buggy and had some glaring inaccuracies, which led people to believe that rush hour was actually rushed hour. Yeah, funny joke everyone. To an extent though, that was true, and it only became even more apparent when the Riesa to Dresden route was released, which also lacked many services and constantly crashed for many people, rendering the route unplayable. All of these issues with the first two of the rush hour routes kinda made people lower their expectations for the upcoming London Commuter Route, expecting it to be no different from the other two, but oh boy were they wrong. In September, it was announced that the route would have over 1,200 services, and that's only the base version of the route, with the full version with all of the layers activated being more akin to 1,400. Keep in mind that that number is only counting playable services. With all of the AI services, the route nears 4,000, which is much more than anything else we've ever seen in the history of TSW2. When playing the route 2, you really get a sense of how much work, time, and effort was put into this timetable. There are instances where you can have multiple trains departing London Victoria at the same time, with the trains almost racing each other to the next station. This is realistic and similar to something that you would see in real life, which only increases the player's immersion, leading to an overall more enjoyable experience. The route stretching over 50 miles with more than 30 stations and all of the services I've mentioned before allows for some really interesting services with a great variety of them. This route, unlike other routes, has managed to keep my interest throughout my time playing it. Where on routes like LIRR or Rhine Austin, I would lose focus and would become repetitive quickly. On this one, I haven't experienced that. I've done multiple services, ranging from full-length London to Brighton services to my favorites, the stopping services within London. The services provide a great variety in length, stopping locations, and what happens on said service. Where one service from London Victoria to East Croydon could be a fast service with no holdups, Another could be a slow service with lots of adverse signals, which is something you don't really experience on any of the other routes in the game. This route offers a new experience for players, allowing us to get the real rush hour feel DTG promised with the release of the rush hour bundle. There is one thing, however, that the route is missing, and that is the Thameslink Services. Now, I'm not saying that the route isn't busy enough, because it is. However, for some people who travel on this line in real life, or just those who know a bit about rail in southern England, it feels like a major part of the route is missing. Now, we all know that DTG has had some issues with licensing and getting Thameslink trains into the game. However, from my knowledge of the situation and what was said on the DTG forums, they could obtain the Thameslink license, however, not the license for the Class 700 itself. With this being known, I think something could have been done to actually include Thameslink on the route, and that involves a different time setting. Setting the route in 2016 or earlier could have allowed DTG to add in the Thameslink Class 319 or 387 to at least include those services and make the route even busier. The creator of the timetable did say, however, that he left room for Thameslink trains, and that if they were added to the route sometime in the future, all that would need to be done is to plug in the gaps. That does leave the door open for a future DLC, and hopefully, if we do get it, they could extend the route up to London Bridge, as that is the only part of the route that is missing. This extension would add an extra 9 miles and 9 stations to the route, along with the possibility of including London Overground services. The extension would also extend some of the current services we have in the game. It could be lumped in with the Thameslink rolling stock and sold for $5 extra than a normal Loco DLC. Other than this, I don't think much else has to be done to really expand the route, although I wouldn't be against any route extensions that resemble something like the South London network in Train Sim Classic, or a possible connection to the East Coastway route to allow for longer and more interesting services. Now for the route itself, the quality is only partly there. There are some things, like the Battersea Power Station, that are modeled accurately and really add to the immersion of the route. However, there are also other things, such as the lack of advertising on the Gatwick Express platforms at London Victoria. Certain things like these take away from the immersion, especially for players who have been to the station in real life. I don't understand why the advertising wasn't added, as DTG already has the Gatwick Express license for the game. It honestly seems like there was a lack of effort to make certain locations resemble their real-life counterpart. Take Ryegate for example. This station was heavily criticized by the community before the release of the route, due to it looking nothing like its real-life counterpart, and while the station itself was fixed, the surrounding area looks nothing like real life. It feels like someone who had barely any interest in creating British routes was in charge of building some of these locations, while others, who may have enjoyed working on British routes more, worked on other portions of the route, which ended up having greater detail. What I'm trying to say is, I want to have some words with whoever made it impossible to cross between the platforms at Clapham Junction. Moving on to the rolling stock that runs along this route, there isn't too much to talk about. There are only 2 trains available for you to drive. The Southern Class 377 and Gatwick Express Class 387. Now with layering, other trains like the Class 375 and 66 are added, but since that isn't available for most players, specifically those who play on last gen consoles, I won't be focusing on them. There's nothing with the 2 trains that were included with the route, besides the usual issue of sounds. For sounds, I'm extremely glad that DTG got all of the sounds from Armstrong Powerhouse, as it really improves the way they sound and it sells the experience. Comparing the new Class 377 on London to Brighton to the older version on East Coastway shows a drastic difference, and that is heavily appreciated. While the sounds like the traction motors, doors, and safety systems were improved, there's absolutely no improvement on things like track noise. I hate having to mention this in every review I make for TSW, but each route just always seems to fall short on getting the track noise correct. You can hear it a bit while coming out of Brighton and while going over points, but anywhere else, and it's practically non-existent. I don't know when this will change, but DTG is always talking about how they need to improve the way they do sounds, and I think this is a great place to start. Other than those issues though, I don't think there's anything else that's too bad about these trains. I do wish that more was added to the route, however, because operating Electro Stars all day can get boring after a while. Now, I guess you can make the argument that the route does actually see more than just Electro Stars. However, you only get that variety with extra layers from routes like Southeastern High Speed and GWR, and it's only available for players on PC and next-gen consoles. Hopefully, in the future, DTG can make the extra layers accessible for all players, but that will require tons of work on optimizing the game, and it would probably take a while. However, it does need to be done to enhance the experience for all players. Through all of its faults, the route still stands to be one of, if not the best route we've ever gotten, and it shows just what can be done with Train Sim World. I know that we all wish DTG could keep the same level of quality across all of its future routes, but when looking at the past, it becomes apparent that that probably won't be the case. Overall though, I do recommend picking this route up, as it is definitely worth the price and offers a ton of stuff for you to do. Thanks for reaching the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button and subscribe if you are new to the channel. Also, consider becoming a channel member with the link in the description below if you would like to support me even further. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.